Santa Gerber, hello.
Hi, Or. Great to be with you.
Good to be with you too. So, we'd like to discuss today the PA, the Palestinian Authority. And my question is, can Israeli families who lost their loved ones were murdered by Palestinian terrorists, can they sue the Palestinian Authority for damages?
Well, right now they're effectively prohibited from suing the Palestinian Authority. It's a great tragedy. The Supreme Court of Israel said that because the PA pays terrorists, therefore the PA has a liability to the victim. But that liability is only compensatory damages, not punitive damages. So the Israeli Social Security system pays $36,000 to $42,000 a year from Israel to victims. The Supreme Court said you can either collect from Israel or from the PA. You cannot collect from both. And therefore, victims have no incentive to sue the PA for funding terror because they have no upside versus Israel.
But let me take you one step back for a second because uh, maybe the deeper question is why would Israeli families who lost their loved ones sue the PA in the first place? And as you're well aware, we at the IDSF, as well as yourself, are heavily involved in the issue of exposing the truth about the Palestinian Authority. Is the Palestinian Authority involved in incentivizing terrorism?
Well, or it's tragic that you have to even ask that question at this point. The Palestinian Authority has laws, a body of law, to pay people to kill Israel, Israelis. They have to be, according to the law, be fighters against Israel. You can't be a car thief. You have to be engaged in trying to fight against Israel. This is a treasured part of the Palestinian people, according to the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority has over 550 full-time people distributing over $350 million each year to 36,000 Palestinian recipients only because of violence against Israel.
So basically, they pay over $350 million per year to terrorists. We know that's about 70% of their budget. And
Yes, so there are actually two budgets, and people sometimes get confused on this. The Palestinian Authority, even though it doesn't have the ability to collect its own taxes, Israel has to collect the taxes for the PA and then give those taxes over the PA. The PA still is a bureaucracy, and a bureaucracy has rules, and a bureaucracy has budgets. And so there are two budgets. One is a budget for prisoners. These are prisoners that have committed security offenses against Israel, convicted in Israeli court for committing a security offense against Israel. So it doesn't mean you have to necessarily kill someone. You have to commit some kind of violent act against Israel. So that's for prisoners. Now there's a separate budget that's for martyrs. Martyrs are murderers who were killed committing the terror act, and they also have a budget. So the total between the two is over $350 million per year.
so what the Palestinian Authority does is basically incentivizing its own people to commit any act of terrorism, whether it's, the murder or any petty crime or stone throwing that would make the person end up in jail or even be killed and then be paid by the PA. So it makes,
But yeah, it's not just educating. Of course, we know they educate. We know they name their soccer tournaments and their town squares and try to glorify the terrorists. But on top of that, there's really nothing more effective than actually paying people for violence. And it's not common in the world. I look for a historical precedent because the more damage you do, the more you get paid. And the only historical precedent I could find was the Massachusetts Bay Colony pre-Revolutionary War in the United States. They paid per Indian scalp. The more Indian scalps you got back, the more you pay. So the PA has done essentially the same thing. If you're in jail for over 5 years as a man, you get an annuity for the rest of your life. If you're in jail for over 10 years, the PA is obligated to create a new role for you within their administration. Their law requires them. The Palestinian Authority has created through their laws and regulations, a government by the terrorists for the terrorists. So if you're in jail as a man for 10 years or more, they are obligated to hire you into their bureaucracy. This is, if you're looking to recruit a terror organization, where better to recruit than from convicted terrorists out of Israeli prisons?
So does the current situation allow these families to sue the PA? We learned that from you that it doesn't. Question is, what can we do to change that? And is there any precedent in the US for, as you said, punitive damages?
Yes, there are plenty of precedents. So let's take a step back. You're allowed to sue for compensatory damages, which doesn't mean anything because Israel pays. You can't collect twice. You are not allowed to sue for punitive damages. That means for punishment. The Israeli Supreme Court decided 2-1 against punitive damages. One judge did say there should be allowed to sue for punitive damages because there's no legal precedent. So that's why now there's a victims law by Yitzhak Pindris and Yuli Edelstein. It's going through the committee to allow victims to sue the Palestinian Authority or, frankly, any terror funder for punitive damages. This is the law of the land throughout the world, that if someone pays for a terror act, you are allowed to sue them for punitive damages. There are many cases in the United States. There's Knox versus the PLO, which awarded $193 million against victims. Ungar versus the PLO, which was $116 million. And there's various lawsuits against Cuba and Iran and others that allow victims to sue for punitive damages against terror funders, people who pay for terror.
All right, so we learned that the PA pays terrorists, but let me ask you this. We know on October 7, thousands of Nukhba terrorists and other Gazan citizens who invaded Israel and basically committed unprecedented atrocities. Are they going to be also paid by the Palestinian Authority?
Well, the Palestinian Authority laws require the PA to pay anyone who attacks Israel without regard to religious or political identification, which means that by law, the PA has to pay Daesh, Al-Qaeda, not just Fatah and Al-Aqsa, and also Hamas terrorists. But the PA has come out with the official proclamation that if you are an October 7th terrorist, you should submit your request for payment, thereby confirming that they will, of course, conform to their law, and they have every intention to pay October 7th terrorists.
So it's quite unbelievable, to be honest. It's, 70 out of every 100 shekels that the PA gets comes from Israel. And indirectly or even directly, it goes to Nukhba terrorists that committed such heinous crimes inside Israel. So this is something
it's such a tragedy. The Wall Street Journal published a piece on specifically this point, that those October 7th terrorists will be paid. And it really outraged people a lot. And frankly, I'm baffled. Why are people outraged by October 7th and they're not outraged by the decades of Palestinian terror in the streets of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem? The atrocities were outrageous, but every Israeli that is killed or wounded by a terrorist is something should outrage people, particularly when they come to the realization that Israel has facilitated willingly the payment and frankly has kept hidden the pay-for-slay infrastructure. The pay-for-slay infrastructure really wasn't known until we started making it known, 2016, 17, and 18, passing the Taylor Force Act and Chok Kizuz in 2018. Even post that time, it was really largely ignored, and I think really squashed because of this notion that the PA is needed to protect Israel.
Actually, I want to challenge you about that, because there are many voices, maybe not the IDSF, but many voices who say that the Palestinian Authority is critical for Israel's security. What you just mentioned, that the security coordination is basically critical for the IDF success around Judea and Samaria and so on. Is it necessary for Israel to keep on an artificial lifeline, this organization called the PA?
Well, this is a matter of realpolitik, and frankly, it makes absolutely no sense that Israel has to be dependent on outsourcing security to an organization that's paying to kill its own citizens. But even more than that, the Palestinian Authority, playing the long game, has been radicalizing and indoctrinating its entire citizenry to be anti-Israel. And so even though in the short term, maybe the PA stops Hamas terrorists because it wants to protect. Now, of course, it won't stop Fatah terrorists, it will only stop Hamas terrorists. And the PA has never imprisoned a single terrorist. Every terrorist that's ever been arrested by the PA has always been released. So the PA is really paying a double game. And it's even worse than that because not only are they paying to kill Israelis, they're also running around the world telling the world that Israel is committing a genocide and ethnic cleansing. And they're repeating this message so much. And Israel is trying so hard to keep the PA in power that Israel's never rebutted, until recently at the ICJ. Israel's never rebutted the claim that Israel's committing a genocide and an ethnic cleansing. And sadly, because Israel's been silent on this, because of the desire to keep the PA in power, because the PA is necessary for physical security, because the PA has been in power for so long, repeating the same message again and again and again, that notion that Israel is genocide and ethnic cleansing has cost Israel its moral legitimacy, not just in the world court, but on the college campuses and throughout much of the Western world. And Israel's moral legitimacy is a strategic asset to Israel, which frankly has been eviscerated. It will take a long time and a lot of effort to be able to recuperate. It's tragic, I think, that Israel feels the necessity, and maybe it's the right thing to do, to show the horror film of October 7th, the 42-minute horror film that shows Israelis as victims. In order to regain Israel's moral legitimacy, Israel has to be the victim again. That was against, I believe, the national ethos, which was post-Holocaust. Israel would no longer be the victim. And yet this all comes out of the subcontracting of Israel's security to the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, so there's this law that's being proposed right now, as you said, that basically takes from the money that was offset from the PA's tax money, correct? What we call חוק, the offset law that would basically leave in Israel's hand plenty of cash, was designated for the Palestinian Authority, and to compensate bereaved families through these funds. But I'd like to ask you, maybe to finish, a personal question. Why are you so passionate about this? I mean, what drove you into being involved in this issue?
My heart bleeds for the victims. It's a great tragedy. And my heart is even sadder when I realize that the Israeli security establishment enabled the PA to conduct this pay-for-slave policy. The tax transfers which Israel collects are then given over to the Palestinian Authority. Chok HaKizuz, which was passed in 2018, withholds money from these tax transfers equivalent to what the PA pays the terrorists, but the security establishment gave back the money that was withheld by the Knesset. They give back through a different pocket. They give that money back to the PA. So essentially, Israel is funding the murder of its own citizens. And maybe that's a security decision that the security establishment has decided that the security of the state of Israel needs to be outsourced to an organization which also happens to pay to kill Israeli citizens. And it just, my heart bleeds that the state of Israel has engaged in an official policy to fund the murder of its own citizens.
Absolutely. And again, $350 million per year as payments to terrorists, that's absolutely unprecedented in world history, and we hope that situation be corrected. Senator Gerber, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Or.